Hi, I'm John Feldt, and this is the Blue Water Outlook Hydrometeorological Assessment Hurricane Sandy briefing for Saturday, October 27th. Let's take a look at some of the satellite pictures with Sandy. Here's the latest. You can see that most of the clouds are on the western part. They're brushing over the eastern coastline of Florida and the Carolinas. Look how far that this system is, how large it is, with the clouds associated with this extending all the way in towards Atlanta to the west and well up towards the northeast U.S. So it's a very large system. If we take a close-up of a visible satellite picture here, we don't really see signs of an eye, but we definitely see a clear circulation around the area here where the eye would be forming. It is a Category 1 hurricane, so there's a possibility of a ragged eye forming as it moves up towards the north. But most of the clouds right now, the organization with this is on the north side and on the west side. These are actually some of the brighter clouds here from the visible satellite picture. And you can see from a radar images here that some of the outer bands are beginning to brush the Carolina coast, both North Carolina and South Carolina coast, and then just off the Florida coast as well. So we do see that the heaviest precipitation right now is on the western side of this system. Precipitable water will play a major role for rainfall amounts, as it always does with tropical type systems. What we see here is the darker shades of brown are the higher amounts of precipitable water, and even though the rainfall is pretty heavy off the coast, look at the difference here. This is where that precipitation is right now, and that's in much less amounts of precipitable water than we see closer to the center. So as this moves up to the north and eventually onshore, you can imagine that the heavier rain amounts that will be much greater because it'll be associated with the center of that circulation versus these outer bands. Now, the latest track by the Hurricane Center does not show a whole lot of change. The cone is still fairly wide, so there's still some uncertainty whether it'll be moving in closer to the south edge of this cone, the north edge of the cone, or right up the middle. But pretty much that northwestward turn that we've looked at for a number of days now, I believe, is confirmed. Also note that as it moves onshore, fairly slow through Wednesday, then it gets picked up and lifted out towards the north and eventually towards the northeast U.S. Now, the model ensembles here are showing a very close cluster now, much better than they showed yesterday this time. Look how close they are here. So I think we have a good confidence for the first 24 hours or so, and then we are getting a good confidence for this turn, and it looks highly confident in this track with all these models now showing a pretty good agreement on where the system will be moving throughout the life of the system as it moves into the north towards the northwest and eventually is lifted out. I do want to mention, even though Blue Water Outlook focuses on water impacts and insight into the water and hydrologic impacts with the system, that wind is going to be a very significant role in this as Sandy moves inland. This is the probability of tropical storm force winds, and you can see that probabilities now are greater than 50% well inland into parts of Pennsylvania and New York State. So with that very heavy rain, we're going to have significant power outages as impacts with Sandy. Okay, so getting back to talk about the water impacts, this is the forecast from the Hydro-Meteorological Prediction Center. I really like this a little bit better than yesterday, as we have the amounts right when it moves onshore of greater than 10 inches up to a foot of rain. I'm pretty sure we're going to have well over a foot and a few point values right along the immediate coast. Note that what we have here is when you have this type of deformation zone here, what we call that is two distinct areas of heavier rain initially, and that means that that system will be interacting with a frontal boundary that's being established inland, and that's going to enhance rainfall and make it a very complicated rainfall forecast, because more likely you're going to have several different cores or axes of heavier rain. Now, one of the things that for many years now, what I've done prior to an event moving inland is look at some of the characteristics, both from a meteorological standpoint and a hydrologic standpoint, that could cause some vulnerability, either high, medium, or low, with this tropical system. And what I looked at here are 7 different aspects. 3 of them I put in medium and 4 in high. And this is not absolute, this is just sort of a judgment call, but it does focus our attention on some of the factors that could occur once Sandy moves inland. So from a medium standpoint, from yesterday's briefing, I mentioned that soil moisture and stream flow were generally in the medium range or in the normal range, pre-existing over the northeast U.S. Now there's some variability in that. Some spots were higher, but for the most part, I think it was in the medium range. Storm movement, that's one I thought about for a long time. It could just as well be in high, but because it's not going to linger there for days upon days, it will be lifted out. I did put it in medium. But I think it's right on that borderline with high because it will take a while to get through. Now on the high side of vulnerability, I put synoptic interaction, a source of tropical moisture, orographic considerations, and just the size. The size is so large that river basins could get widespread coverage of heavy rain versus a smaller system where there still could be heavy rain, but it would not be covering an entire drainage area. I'm going to talk about some of these in a little bit more detail. First of all, tropical moisture source. I showed you the upper system and the precipitable water that's now off the eastern coast of Florida. Well, that lifts north and eventually northwest, and you can see that core of high precipitable water by Tuesday is being pulled directly onshore. And that pulse of heavy precipitable water, tropical moisture being pulled in from the Atlantic is going to cause very, very heavy rainfall, and that's going to enhance the rainfall amounts and the hydrologic flooding potential as well. Orographic considerations I also placed as a high vulnerability. If you look at here carefully, you can see that there's higher elevations here extending from Pennsylvania through far western Maryland, western parts of Virginia. And then this is that core of heavy rain here in the red, and that is moving into the higher elevations, and that's going to result in a potential for debris flows and the possibility of flash flooding. Also on the cold air side of the system, on the other side here, you can see that there's also an enhanced type orographic lift. In this case, we're talking about snowfall. Very heavy amounts of snowfall in that region of West Virginia. The third factor I put in the high category was a synoptic interaction. With this cold air to the north, we have high pressure to the north, and that's going to be pulling this cold air down to the south. We're going to be pulling in that warmer tropical moisture, and there will be a boundary that will be separating these two air masses. Precipitation could very much be enhanced due to that interaction with that frontal boundary. Now I mentioned the duration of the storm, and I'm going to talk just a bit here about hydrologic ensembles for main stem rivers. And these are traces of precipitation at one point in Pennsylvania. And what I wanted to point out here, we have on the left is the amount of rain, and on the bottom axis is time. And this might be typical for any given point. But it's saying that the heavier rain is going to occur basically over about a 30-hour time frame. That doesn't mean that we're going to, that'll be the only rain. There will be rain much longer than that, but the heaviest rain over about a 30-hour time frame. After that, it does look like the models are pretty consistent in that the rain drops off significantly and, basically ends after that period. And that's why I did for the most part, put that in medium as far as the duration of rainfall. But again, it's very close to the high range in that as well. This will change over the next couple days. It's from our river forecast centers. They're ensembles of hydrographs for river flooding. Right now showing a high probability, greater than 70% of major flooding over parts of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and moderate flooding over a very large area. That's the area in red. This will change quite a bit over the next couple days as we get additional rainfall and more accurate rainfall forecasts, but it just shows some potential. I think these areas in red and purple will probably expand over the next couple days, but these are some of the earlier areas that we might want to keep an eye out upon landfall and the heavier rain. Now, in addition to the rainfall from a hydrometeorological perspective, heavy snow is also expected in West Virginia primarily, What I have here are probabilities of snowfall over 1 foot, and green is saying there's at least a 40% probability of snowfall over 1 foot in that area. And I pointed out earlier that's due to that interaction in the cold air with that tropical moisture and some orographic effects. So the bottom line from a hydrometeorological assessment, this still looks like a historic rain and inland flood event. There's going to be all sorts of hydrologic impacts, pretty much every possible variety: surge and wave action along the coast, near coast pooling of water, urban flooding. Keep in mind that the northeast U.S. is highly and very densely populated, so there'll be widespread urban flooding, flash flooding primarily in the higher elevations, and main stem river flooding as well as snow. Thank you for listening to Blue Water Outlook's hydrometeorological assessment for Saturday. If you'd like automatic notification of updates, go to bluewateroutlook.com. You can sign up for updates for future briefings. Thank you.